video's rolling.
Okay.
Got a red box.
All right.
We're good to go.
Good. No box on my face?
No.
That's what she said. All right.
Check them all.
It's not that kind of video.
It's a different type of film.
Yeah. All right. Hey, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are here with Brant Menswar, and he's a speaker. He said his title is just a speaker.
That's it. Nothing fancy, man.
Keeping it simple.
People just pay me to come and flap my gums. That's it.
So, what led you into public speaking?
Well, I think it was a bit of a journey, a little different, I think, than most. I started in the music business, with my band Big Kettle Drum. Pause for applause. Fine. We are huge on Animal Planet. For those of you who want to find us, just that background music, the bears doing it in the woods. That's Big Kettle Drum.
So hold on. I got to pause you for 1 minute. I've heard you say that before.
Yeah.
Is that true?
It is the honest to God's
That'd
truth.
be weird if he made it up.
It is the truth.
I don't know. It sounds like something I would.
They use us. We signed a deal with Discovery Channel networks, and so they use our music all over all of their different networks. So that's everything from the car shows, bike shows, motorcycle shows, to the Animal Planet, which they own as well. And so, yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, I guess, right? I mean,
Yeah.
every once in a while, there's some bears fornicating with a little BKD in the background. That's it. It's nice. It's nice. Some people, they shoot high. They want Coke commercials. They want Apple.
Yeah.
We go for bears doing it in the woods. Just a little mating season stuff.
Was that an actual experience that you had? Like you turned on you're like, hey, let's check it out. Like our music might be on here. And then you turn it on and it's like, and now the mighty grizzly.
It's worse than that because they actually told us that it was going to be used for that. And we said, okay.
We have some bear fornication scenes.
That's right. We have
And
more.
we're
That's
looking for a certain style of music.
You have anything with more beats per minute?
Yeah.
I know your stuff isn't really hitting with the humans,
Yeah.
but bears are in love with Big Kettle Drum.
Hey, never knock any music that you make money from.
Well,
Even a little, even
Yeah.
$1.
that's true.
That is
Just because
true.
the checks they send cost more to mail me
yeah,
than
yeah.
the amount that BMI pays me.
Yep.
Yes.
That's cool though.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, our first time we ever heard our song on anything was in one of these biker build-off shows, right? So they're making a motorcycle, and it's a ridiculous story, right? So we signed this deal with this guy that we met through some of our Nashville team at the time when we were signed to a label, and he's like, I have this deal with Discovery Channel, and they want to use some of your music. We said, okay, great, fantastic. So he tells us there's one of these biker build-off shows that are going to use it. So we're watching it. We know the date it's coming on. We know the song they're going to use, a song called Just a Man. And it's got this killer little guitar riff that starts off. And so the second sort of portion of the show, they are highlighting this builder from North Carolina. And the scene is the wheels are spinning. It's slow motion. He's pulling a wheelie. And in the background, you hear this bang-a-dang-a-dang, dang-a-dang-a-dang. It's sort of playing some Big Kettle Drum. We're like, yeah. So told all our friends, you got to watch this. Of course, it came on at like 2 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, got to watch this. It's fantastic. Our first sort of big time breakthrough with our music. And then we got a call the next week that the show had been canceled.
Oh.
And so we were like, all right, that's not the greatest news. They were supposed to use more of our music. And so the guy calls us, our licensing guy, and he says, hey, you know what? Don't worry about it. I got another show lined up. It's a show called Fat and Furious. And we're like, what the hell is Fat
All
and Furious?
Yeah.
He goes,
I'm
"Well,
listening.
Yeah.
It's a show about their mechanics, but they're so fat that they can't really work on the cars, so they just get pissed off and yell at each other a lot."
I feel like they're looking for ideas.
Like, that's a show? I'm like, are they going to pay?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right then. So they are, on this episode, they are building a like a 68 GTO, right? And they're
Or
gonna,
not building.
Or not building.
Yeah. I can't get my wrench.
That's right. They're trying to get around the fatness. But they're able to put together this cars, it's the last scene. They're running the quarter mile. And again, slow motion, wheels start spinning, smoke's coming everywhere, and you hear it. Here it is again, Big Kettle Drum. That show got canceled.
Same song.
Same song. That show got canceled. So we're at this point we are just laughing that every show that uses us gets canceled.
Yeah.
We coined our own phrase, which is we are Hollywood's most dangerous band. We just shut down TV shows. Everybody who uses our stuff. But then we get a call from Amazon.
Okay.
And they have a show called Hand of God, which was this critically acclaimed show with Ron Perlman from Sons of Anarchy.
Yep.
And they're like, we want to use your music. And we're like, heck yeah. So, got an extra zero on the check. We're pretty excited about it. It's a big payday.
So it's $10 instead of
$10. Not far away. But they tell us, they describe the scene, and it's this, it's the beginning of season 2 and the cliffhanger that ends the first season. They're going to be playing our music on a boombox in this burned down house.
That's kind of cool.
Like, you had us at boombox, right? I'm like, come on, we're children of the 80s.
Okay,
so
I didn't know
us,
if he was going to like that or not.
Oh, come on. That had us right there. So they tell, this is going to be great. The show's critically acclaimed. We're like, fantastic. So we're waiting. They tell us when it's going to come out, and we're like, okay, we think we know. And so we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, I get a Google alert that says, Hand of God, canceled. So the Amazon show canceled before it even aired.
Wow.
So, yeah. Our music is, all I'm saying is it's some powerful shit.
All I'm saying is put our music in your shows.
and
you don't want to use our music for this podcast.
Yeah.
It would be over.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
No one can cancel us.
Yeah.
No one even cares that it's on.
Yeah.
No one's going to cancel us.
Yeah.
YouTube's not going to be like, listen, you're the only podcast we've ever canceled.
Yeah.
Yes.
What? That's not true. That's not true. Anyway.
That's it.
That's cool.
So the music stuff sort of led me to... honestly, to 2 different roads. One was I wanted to get off the road. My oldest son had gotten really sick and was going to need a bone marrow transplant. He had a rare blood cancer. And so we knew we were going to spend some time in the hospital, and I just couldn't be on touring all the time. And so my plan to transition was to pastor a church. And I did that for about about 6 years, all in. But just, I think it was the right thing for me at that time, that chapter of my life, but really felt the need to sort of expand my church, if you will, and started to work with an organization called Banding People Together. And these were a bunch of rock stars that were all looking to get off the road, and so they started to do corporate training and corporate songwriting, where you'd go in and do some team building exercises where different organizations would write songs together. And that sort of led me into developing my own stuff, my own brand. I still do a lot of work with Banding People Together. The family there are just great. The organization's great. But for me, ended up writing a book that came out last year, and called Rock and Roll With It, Overcoming the Challenge of Change. And it talks about a little bit about the experience we had with our son Theo, and the co-author, one of my best friends, Jim Trick, was someone who lost over 200 pounds. And so his change that he experienced was intentional change that he wanted to make. My change was unintentional change that was sort of forced on us. And how do you deal with those things? That's what the book sort of covers. And that just, in the last year, has really taken off and given me a platform to talk to people about. For me, I mainly focus on 3 different things, and that's sort of the core values that we all possess and what that looks like, the purpose that we all have, that we choose for our lives, and then sort of our missions. How do we live it out? Mm-hmm. And so that's what's been happening for me for the last years. Really taken off. It's where I met Rich and at an event that I was speaking at, and continues to just blow my mind that people actually give a shit about what I say and want to hear what I talk about.
Yeah. So I'm a pretty honest guy. I talked to you after meeting you at Imaging. So I go to these conferences, and usually if I walk away with one thing, I'm like, okay, cool. That made it worth it. So I saw you the day, I told you about this. Yeah. I saw you the day at the keynote, and I saw you out in front, and I looked over and I was like, great, another rock star photographer.
Yeah.
Like,
because it's at the PPA.
Because it's at the PPA, and
which is a photographer's convention.
And so when I found out you were actually a rock star, I was like, yes, okay.
All right.
The image is justified.
Yeah.
But like when I first looked over, I was like, look at this guy. Thinks he's a rock star.
What a douche.
Which
He's just
exists.
a-
Which exists.
Which
and it's
exists.
so
There's
weird.
photographers out there that are like,
Yeah.
you're the rock star photographer. And there's probably like tutorials.
This is how I compare my photography to Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Like that.
They just act like they're these celebrities and they're photographers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I saw you, I was like, I literally looked over and I was like, look at him with his hair, thinking he's a rock star. So then when I saw you, I went into your class, I still thought, or your keynote, I still thought you were, I didn't look up anybody. I still thought you were a photographer. And then you you came out and you start singing this horrible, like just horrible. Like it was, but
you.
on purpose. And
Bears like it.
yes, but everyone just, I could tell it was this awkward moment because no one wanted to call you out on it, but they were like,
Well, it was also like, oh no,
well,
we're gonna like just
no,
this
dude,
is
they
gonna
started,
be bad.
No, some of them were like, yeah, like they just didn't want to.
You can do it.
Yeah. He's like,
so
he's like cracking, like he's doing it on purpose. And
Yeah,
then finally
yeah.
he just goes, I'm kidding. And then you start going into everything about your son.
yeah.
You start talking about the purpose thing, which I think, for me, that's always, before I saw you speak, I've always kind of been skeptical of stuff like that, where I'm just like, okay, like really, what am I doing? What's going on? And I thought the way you presented it was very creative, and to a way where it didn't feel hokey.
Sure.
And like the presentation was so well laid out that I was like, okay, this doesn't sound like he's trying to sell me snake oil, or you get what I mean?
And
Like
he's
do.
not. Oh, good. He's not a photographer.
I do.
and oh, good.
Yeah.
He's actually in a band. Like when you were
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm in Big Kettle Drum,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's justified.
Yes.
Now. That's cool. But I was just blown away, and I expressed this to you too, was because I do stuff with nonprofits and I have a nonprofit, I understand how people connect to those stories. And I was just another guy in the crowd that was like, I need to talk to that guy about my experience with the childhood cancer nonprofit. And I thought I really had a lot of respect for the way that you stopped everyone and said, listen, you guys are going to want to come up to me. You're going to want to talk to me. You're going to want to, really express this to me. And I want to be there for you. And I thought that was the most genuine thing that happened during that conference. And then, of course, when we went upstairs and there was like a guest question, you answer, ask them questions. The first guy's like, how do I make money off of this?
Yeah.
And you're just like, what do I, but I mean, you handled him well, but
Sure.
it was a question that I was like, okay, this is great stuff, but how do I implement this into my, and I made a joke about how your, is it your mission statement or your purpose statement?
Yep.
Is exactly like mine.
Yep.
Like I want to tell stories. I want to use my talents to tell genuine, authentic stories.
Yeah.
And make the biggest impact I can for the people who don't have that voice. And I feel like you said that,
Yes.
and it was just better laid out than I could ever write it. So anyway, that's my experience with, that's why when I met you, I was like, oh
Sure.
my God, like this
Yeah.
is awesome. This is good stuff. And that most inspirational part of that entire conference for me.
Well, thanks, man.
So
no, I appreciate
wait
that.
for applause, I guess.
I appreciate that. No, listen, it's when you start talking about purpose, I think so many people have bastardized it over the years that people roll their eyes and or they try to make it about religion or something like that, and it's not that. And honestly, so Simon Sinek, who is a real famous author and speaker, and wrote this book that's called Start With Why, and it really put him on the map with his TED Talks of a bazillion people who watch him. And he talks about the importance of starting with why, even as an organization. And for me personally, I just think he's dead wrong. And you can't start with why. You have to start with what. And the what is, what are your non-negotiables? What are your core values, the things that matter most to you more than anything else? And when I ask people that question, I get stared at with blank stares, or I get something made up in the moment that they want to tell me because they don't They feel bad that they don't have this sort of defined. They don't own
Yeah.
it. You know, there's a difference between being able to tell me something that's important to you than a value that you own it, you live it, you filter your decisions through it. And I think that is something that is, well, I know it's something that's missing because all the talks that I do, I ask the question, show of hands, how many people here can tell me your 4 or 5 core values, you know, what they mean to you, why you chose them, and the examples of proof. And no one can raise their hands because no one takes it that far. It's funny. It's like it's almost, I call it a decision supply chain, right? So let's say you're drinking a nice cup of coffee. You love the cup of coffee, but if you really want to know what makes the coffee incredible, you got to trace it all the way back to the bean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where did the bean get picked? Where did it come from? How did they grow this bean?
The soil,
the whole bit,
Yeah.
right? Well, in our lives, people don't trace it all the way back. They stop at most of the time at emotion, right? We make a decision because it feels a certain way, or we get certain information given to us and we make our decision based on that. And then we don't know if that decision was good or bad. And we sort of base it on the outcome. And that's just flawed. That's a flawed psychology, right?
Yeah.
You can't base it on the outcome. You have no control over the outcome whatsoever. All you have control over is the deliberate intention that goes into making those decisions in your life.
Well, and people are, I feel like when you were talking, I was like, I'm doing this stuff already.
Mhm.
I just don't have a name for it. I didn't label it. You know
Right.
what I mean? So I wasn't aware of it. I kind of was
Right.
like, and so it made more sense to me. And it didn't feel like I was, again, being sold something that was
Right.
like, oh, by the way, buy my book. You
That's
know what I
right.
mean? And
That's right.
so it was really genuine. And I was like, oh, all I'm doing is becoming aware of it. It's almost like these watches.
Mhm.
Like when they're like, oh, you need to take 10,000 steps a day.
Mhm.
Once you become aware that you're not doing 10,000 steps, it does influence your habits and moving. And
That's right.
this thing will vibrate and say, hey, go walk. You need to get up and moving.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just like identifying it, seeing it, and saying, okay, well, I already do this. I just don't have a name for it. You get what I mean?
I do, but what I'll tell you is that there's a sequence, and this is the missing piece, right? So if you want to be able to choose your purpose, which I believe that's one of the biggest sort of fantasies out there, is that we find our purpose. We don't find purpose, we choose purpose. But we can't choose our purpose until we define those things that matter most to us, because your purpose is the activation of your core values. That's what purpose actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And so for someone to say my purpose is X or my purpose is Y, and they can't tell me what their 4 or 5 core values, I'm calling bullshit every time, because
Yeah.
it's just not how it works, right?
Yeah.
So you have to define those things first and own them, so that you understand that every decision you make gets filtered through these 4 or 5 things. And if you've made a good decision, it's because it's in alignment with those things that you say matter most to you, right? You didn't violate any of those things that you say, these are the most important things in my life. So that's on one side. Yes, I own those values. So for me, my values: creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, and authenticity. Those 6 things. Every decision I make in my life gets filtered through those 6 things. You guys want to ask me to come onto this show, I have to look at that and go, yeah, it checks off a bunch of those boxes for me, I'm in.
Yeah.
If they don't, if you were doing something that I didn't quite align myself with, then the answer is no. And I know I've made a good decision because I didn't violate any of those things that I said.
Our
What if-
podcast is aired on the Satan Network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's a question. What if they eventually lead to an outcome that then helps enforce that? So you get what I mean? Like what if okay, we
don't.
may not check off all these boxes, but getting my message out there to then help other people checks off those boxes.
Still a bad decision.
yeah.
Still a bad decision.
Bad decision if it
Well, I
violates
mean, we
those
know-
things before.
I mean, yeah, that's
You
it's
can't
like
do the outcome.
it's like trying to get somewhere with like trying to get to the other side of a river with a broken bridge.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I get it. And I kind of feel like too, like I feel like people do things in their life and then that's why they're not happy that they're doing it. So they may volunteer at a nonprofit,
Mhm.
but they only do that because they feel like, or they've been told at church that they should.
Sure.
And then they realize this is horrible. I don't want to be doing this because it doesn't align with who they are.
That's right.
And what I really like is there's no shame in these things.
Mm-mm.
There's no like, oh, that's your core value. You're a bad person.
no.
It's just like,
or
no.
like that's dumb.
Well, but by what I gathered is by identifying these things, it makes you less of a bad person because then you're not letting people down by jumping in and doing something that you shouldn't be doing.
By identifying these things, you draw a line in the sand of which to hold yourself accountable to.
Yeah.
And that's why people don't do it, is because no one wants to hold themselves accountable to shit.
I know.
Right?
It's frustrating.
It is. So what they do is they make up excuses because we're really good at making up excuses. And that's way easier and honestly, way more creative.
Preach.
In Florida, you might have a huge market in Florida for that.
Sure.
Well, have you noticed something? Have you noticed geographical differences with that kind of thing? Because what I've noticed, just to give you like an example of what I'm talking about, is that coming to Florida, I feel like there's more of a culture where people don't like to be at fault. Like,
It's bad.
Something's, it's
If you
just,
say like, hey,
it's mean.
Yeah.
If you say,
Yeah.
this is your fault.
Yeah.
Not that even that you're blaming
Sure.
blaming them, just kind of, did you do this?
Right.
Well, I mean, yeah. And it's like, it's like Hammond from Jurassic Park. I don't, what's he say? I don't blame people for their mistakes, but I do ask that they pay for them.
Yeah.
But people, it seems in Florida, hate that. They don't want to be held accountable for what they've done more than where I'm from, Seattle, where there seems to be a more, logical, I guess, way of thinking instead of emotional. Where, I mean, Seattle and Olympia, where I'm from, it's more, like accountability is a big thing there.
Sure.
But here it seems like not so much. So have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah. So yes, and I think it's more than even just location or cultural or those sorts of things. I think
age.
Well, it's a little bit of each, right? So I think it kind of crosses over a couple of different generations. I see it in the difference in values of someone who served in World War II as opposed to a Gen Zer. I see it in, I grew up I'm from Manchester, New Hampshire. So we're in New England, we're in Catholic country, you grow up guilty because that's the rite of passage, and come down to Florida here, and it's very different, right? Or even out west where they may be a little more liberal out on the California side of how they think and how they were brought up, and the deterioration of things like the 3-generational family. I grew up with my grandparents being a massive part of my upbringing, and both my parents were together and are still together. In this day and age, it's rare. It's rare to have that, and so
it's because of the boomers.
There's no passing.
It's because of the
anything.
boomers.
I remember going to my grandparents' house, and my grandfather was a mechanic and was in the Navy, and then when he got out of the Navy, and their basement was a dirt floor up in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
You'd go down and it's literally his workshop. It's in a dirt floor with.
I bet you could still smell it.
Without question, right?
You could smell it
without question. But that work ethic, that I don't need the best, environment to do this. I'm just gonna get down and get my hands dirty and make stuff, right, or fix stuff. Today, everyone looks for an excuse why. Well, I know I need to do that, but I need to get this new tool that's going to make it way easier for me to do this. Or
it's funny because we talk about this a couple times where it's like that. Everyone likes to blame millennials, but they really don't know what that term even means.
Right.
Millennial right now is just the term for young people.
Sure.
And I'm a millennial. I'm an older millennial. I think it's ironic that people complain about millennials on a platform made by millennials, which is insane.
Yes.
Half the internet's made by millennials.
Sure.
So, but I think you're starting to see this. I'm starting to see this little correction of it. And I was slightly joking when I said it's the boomers. I truly believe that the boomers, they were raised by people like your grandfather who were in the military, had a purpose to fight.
Yep.
And they said, hard work, and they were very disciplined. And then the boomers come along and they're like, we don't like that. Everyone's a winner. Everyone's, because it's always the millennials. You guys are self-entitled. You feel like you need a trophy for participating. And at some point I was like, well, maybe that's true. And then it just dawned on me. It's like, who gave us those trophies? I didn't ask for it. What? wait, you're blaming me. You're the one that made this mess kind of thing. And I feel like millennials now, the older millennials who are having kids starting to run things, they're going back to that craft thing. I mean, I crave having a craft. And luckily I'm able to make a living off of photography, but at one point I was doing everything. I was a jack of all trades. I was doing everything I could do. And then it was like, no, I really want to get in. I want to fail quick. I want to fail fast, and I want to recover quicker and grow my photography leaps and bounds than just coming up with these excuses. But I did start off with, like you said, I need this in order to do that. Yeah. And that's how I started. But I feel like, I don't know, but I also know a lot of people that it's all about excuses. I mean, I grew up with 10 brothers and sisters, and all of us are different. Some of us use excuses to justify everything, and some of us don't. And it's, I don't know. I mean, I do feel like it's territorial. I feel like it's culture, but then it's also hit or miss where it's like, you really don't know. Like,
well, I think you hit the nail on the head in that this was done to you as a generation.
But get over it and fix it.
So what an opportunity, right? So the snake oil salesman in me would say this is an incredible opportunity for boomers, and even me, for Gen Zers, to...
You're Gen Z. What is...
I'm sorry, I'm a Gen X.
Gen X. I was like, wait a minute.
Gen X.
Which one's Gen Z?
My son's a Gen Z.
Oh,
that's
man, you look
a
good.
Newer one. What's Gen Z?
Gen Z is like digital natives. They're people who are
after millennials, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're younger than the millennials
Right.
are. Yeah. And so, as a Gen Xer, yes, for me, I believe personally, my own belief is that there's a responsibility to invest into the millennials. Because they didn't get that opportunity. Yeah. A lot of them were just robbed of that opportunity, or they were coddled in such a way that they don't know how to lose.
Yeah.
And they don't.
Well, they don't even know it exists.
They don't know how to win either.
Yeah.
And so, if you don't know how to win and you don't know how to lose, all those lessons that come through playing, whether it's team sports or it's any sort of organized anything as a child, where now you're right that if I got a trophy to participate on the team, that's great, but when I grew up, you only got a trophy if you won.
Yeah. And
so I valued winning. I didn't get obsessed with winning, but I certainly valued winning because obviously there's a different level and different things happen when you win.
Yeah.
And I tell my kids the whole time, I didn't care whether or not they won or lost, no matter what they were doing. I didn't care. What I did care about is that they wanted to win. Yep. That's what I cared about.
So I had an experience. My son runs cross country, really good cross country runner. He's 9 years old. And the meets are at like 6 a.m, which is like, first off, whoever that person is that picked that, like they need to just stop.
They need to go to the hockey people and live on an island somewhere.
So he's the first one. He gets the top 10, right? The second meet comes along, and he's walking, just laughing, having a good old time. So I'm like, okay, didn't even try. So he gets done, and I was like, what was that, man? And he's like, I don't know. I had a cramp this week. And I was like, all right, well, let's try a little bit harder next week. So the next race comes, he does the same thing. And now I'm done. I'm just like, I woke up. I was at the studio until 1, and I had to wake up for this. Yep. I didn't even meet him at the finish line.
Well, it was like it was like a fake cramp, and
he was laughing,
he was like not taking it seriously. And then Rich, of course, is watching him from the sideline, and then he like caught his eye.
And
Rich's eye, and he's like, ha, 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 like, don't kill me.
So he gets done. I don't even meet him at the finish line. I'm already walking to the van. And my wife, who was raised by a boomer who literally, there's no fault, everyone's a winner, which is the most false statement ever. So we're walking, and, my wife's like, Caden, we're still proud of you. And I was like, I'm not proud of him. I'm actually really disappointed. Not today. Yeah. And my daughter, who's 5, who's so sensitive, she just goes, he tried his hardest, Dad. And I was like, no, he didn't. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
I was like, Kylie, I wouldn't care if he came in dead last.
Yep.
If he is running and he tries his hardest. And you, like Caleb said the other day, he was in the Army and he they said it's either first or puking.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I was
Like,
it was
and that's the thing.
yeah, it was a PT race, and so I'm running this race when I used to be in shape, and so I do a 550 mile, which isn't like the fastest or whatever, but still
Decent.
it's under 6 minutes. All right, it's
Yep.
like, what do you want from me?
Right.
And so I go across the finish line, and I'm dying. I'm like trying to find air.
Yes.
And the captain was standing there, and there was there had been people in front of me because in the Army there's some fitness freaks that do 455
Yeah.
crazy stuff. But anyway, I was there, and I'm like, ugh. And the captain he looks at me and he goes, "You didn't get first. You didn't puke. Maybe next time show up and give a damn." And it was like, and I just was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, and now like whenever, especially when people are running, if they didn't win
Yep.
and they didn't and they're not puking, it's kind of like, did you try your hardest? I think that it's like this weird, now
We were at a kids race. We got hired to photograph a kids race last weekend.
oh yeah.
And one girl came across the finish line, just
She was
puked.
like 8.
She was like
Eight.
8, just puked all over, and the mom's apologizing. Caleb goes, "That's awesome."
She tried the hardest.
She tried the hardest. The first place guy didn't even puke.
Yeah.
The first place guy didn't even puke. And Caleb's like, don't apologize for that. She tried.
Yeah.
And like,
That's awesome.
it's the only time I've seen him congratulate a kid. That wasn't his. He's like, no,
right.
good for you.
That's
good for
it.
you.
I was
It's
like,
so
and I
funny.
told her, I was like, look around all these other kids. Do you see them trying? No, none of them
Yeah.
are actually
None
trying.
of them puked.
And
None of
the
them puked.
mom, it's funny how the mom was so embarrassed. And then when I said that, she was like, that's true.
Yeah.
Like, it hadn't even dawned upon her.
Yeah.
I was like, nobody else has ran to the point where they're throwing up.
Yep.
It's true.
And
You're
the
absolutely
mom
right.
was like, good job. Like to her daughter.
Next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Puke again.
So I and like I said, I mean, I feel like that's being corrected. I feel like,
Yeah.
I agree with the participation trophy thing, but again, it's like to sit there. I feel like it's just being used to discredit an entire generation to say, listen, we don't have to listen to you yet because you have gotten
Yeah.
participation trophies.
Yeah.
There was an author, I don't know her name, but she came out with a book called Raising an Adult, and she was an admin or admissions executive at UC Berkeley or something, and she said she noticed. She's like, "Listen, this book is not for Gen Xers. It's not for millennials. I'm talking to you, boomers."
Yeah.
She's like, "You have single-handedly ruined entire generations because we have robbed them, like you said, of these experiences."
Yep.
When I was a kid, I grew up with Gen Xers, so I relate more with Gen Xers.
Sure.
But I didn't come home till the streetlights were on. My parents weren't concerned where I was all the time, probably for other reasons. But the point is that now, if you see a kid under 15 walking down the street, your first reaction is to call the cops.
Yeah.
That kid's in trouble.
Yep.
Right? And now there's this whole thing, free range kids. They're wearing notes in their backpacks. I'm not in danger. I'm a free range kid. Right? All because of this lie that we've been told about strangers. They say, so back, even when I was a kid, I remember watching like Unsolved Mysteries, and that Walsh dude gets on there and he's like, they never found his body.
Yes.
Like, and you're like, oh
Robert-
my God.
Robert Stack.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and she breaks down the statistics, and she's like, in the U.S., we have the Department for Exploited and Missing Children, right? And she's like, out of the numbers that they release, they don't break them down. They say, okay, 250,000 kids go missing every year. What they don't tell you is that 95% of those kids are with,
97.
or it's like 97% is with non-custodial parents. They're not strangers.
Yeah.
So she's like, and then she breaks it down even more, and she's like, the fact that the chance of a stranger stealing your kid
Yes.
is pretty slim.
Yes.
Most of the danger comes from grooming or parents that or family members or friends
Yep.
that groom you to put your guard down.
That's right.
So it's this different way of like looking at things. I don't know how we got on this, but we were talking about purpose and then it led to this.
No, well,
But-
here's the thing is that the whole thing with the younger generation is we've done them a disservice in two ways. One, in which we never allowed them to have these experiences that we had previous of winning or losing or any of the really tough stuff that
Adventure,
that
fear.
taught us some really great lessons, right?
Yeah.
But the younger generation, they want to be passionate. They have this passion in them, but the crazy thing is they have no idea what they're passionate about. They just know they're passionate. And that's an even more, to me, it's even a worse scenario, because if you want to be passionate and you have that burn inside of you to say, gosh, this is something that I just know that I'm a passionate person, but you can't put your finger on what you're passionate about, it's really frustrating.
But in the
That's
same,
not even a new problem either.
but
I
but
feel
in
like,
the same,
trying to figure out what you're passionate about has been unless
But look at what we do to passionate people. I mean, I see it all the time. You
Yeah.
see these little kids stepping up, voicing their opinions about adult things, and then the generation up goes, "Hey, shut up! You eat Tide Pods."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then with social media, you have them. It's this continuous discrediting
Yeah.
of fake things that never existed. When really it's the pot calling the kettle black,
Well,
where it's like,
We
hey,
forget all of the stupid things that we supposedly.
well,
you
it's
know?
like, do you know why I have to give a license to buy spray paint? Because you were literally huffing it.
Yes, yes.
No one's eating Tide Pods,
Yes,
okay?
yeah.
But you really huffed paint. Like,
yeah.
I still have to give my license
Yeah.
20 years after they were doing that. So I can see why people are like, if I get that passionate, am I just going to get shot down, or am I? And again, it's we should be trained with that experience of like putting blinders on and ignoring those people. I mean, if we quit every time we did something that was, I mean, we did that series for No More Options, where I had parents come in.
Yep.
They wrote a letter to the children that they lost.
Yep.
And then we took a photo of them. We had people track down our company all the way to Yelp and leave bad reviews
Sure.
on Yelp because they said we were taking advantage of parents' pain
Sure.
and being unethical.
Yeah.
So it's like, why is it worth the trouble to even do that?
Sure.
Luckily, I'm also like, hey, F you.
Yeah.
You can't stop me. Like,
But you
You
guys, you have to know that you guys, and you are two exceptions to the rule, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to know that that's. I mean, so out of all the talks that I give and the thousands of people that fill out their surveys when I'm done my talks, over 80% of the people who don't like my talks are millennials.
well, yeah, because they don't like the truth.
They don't want to be questioned on what they value.
What do you know, Gen Xer?
That's exactly-
Get off
so-
the stage.
so-
well, I wonder if you could go back in time,
Mhm.
if when the baby boomers were young, if they would have been the ones that didn't like your talk.
I think you bring up a good point. I think our friend Scott Stratton says this in his talks a lot, which is every generation hates the generation after.
I
Dude,
always
when-
look
when
at that.
he-
I always
yeah,
look at that.
But the way he did that at Imaging,
Yeah.
so he put up a quote, and it was like, this generation needs to move out of their basement.
Yep.
They need, or their parents' basement. They need to get their act
Being
together.
coddled.
Being coddled. You know
Yep.
what their problem is? They need to pick themselves
Yep.
up and get a job.
Yeah.
And all these Gen Xers and boomers are clapping. Yeah, take that.
Yeah.
And then he goes, this was written in 1997
Yeah.
on Forbes
Yes,
or like
yeah.
on Forbes magazine. They're talking about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, and that's what I like about Scott will bash millennials and tell them what's wrong with them, but also say, hey, just so you know, like
Yeah.
they're an easy target right now
Oh,
because
sure.
they're up and coming. They've literally handed you this platform to then yell at them. And then, so I think it's, for me, generational stuff is more of it just makes it easier to lump people into like a category, right?
Sure.
But I think, like, to the point of Caleb, like, do you find it with these territories? Because millennials in Florida are not like millennials in New Jersey. They're not like millennials in California. And same thing with boomers and Gen Xers. You know what I mean? So it's I think culture plays a big role in it.
Yeah.
And I think me personally, what I see is I see this constant cry of they're trying to take my culture away from me. Oh, they're trying to change Santa. They're trying to get rid of Christmas. There's a war on this. But when no one's taking a step back and going, well, no one can stop me from putting a stocking up in my house and still celebrating Christmas.
Sure.
If culture starts at home, not on the internet.
Right.
If people are like, oh, they're not playing my favorite Christmas song, go home and play it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So to me, it's like I think people need to take a step back and realize just because someone on Twitter says that Santa needs a new gender, that doesn't necessarily mean Santa's going to get a new gender.
Doesn't even mean anybody even. I mean, that was like 14 people.
No, but my point, you get my point though. It's but I saw people that I know go, oh, it's an attack on Christmas, and it's like, unless they come into your house and take away your stockings and Christmas tree, the only attack on Christmas is what you allow them to do.
Right.
Have fun with your family.
Right.
Culture starts at home, and so I think that comes down to what you teach about the core values. Is like, if you just focus on yourself, you're not going to care what they need to find their core values.
Yeah. So what you're describing is the tug of war, right? That I talk about all the time, which is a tug of war that happens between our core values and our feelings, and how we make our decisions is in the middle of that fight.
And your thing is core values can't be changed.
Core values are developed over the course of a lifetime, and they rarely change.
They're harder to change. Yeah.
Yes. Those are things that have been ingrained in you over decades, right? The issues, to me, the issues that we have in this country right now stem from, we don't have values-based discussions. We have emotional-based discussions. So we allow social media to get us all worked up, and 14 people say they want to change the gender of Santa, and all of a sudden we take that emotion that we feel because we are threatened by somebody saying something like that, and we allow our emotions to drive the conversation, and that is not ever going to get us into alignment with each other from the left and right? It's never going to happen. And so that's why we have all the the political issues right now. If we would have values-based discussions, I believe the distance between the left and right are actually not quite as far as we think they are.
Correct.
But we don't. We allow all of the emotional stuff to get in the way and really cloud the true discussion and the true arguments that need to be had to find the best solutions. But that's it continues. I don't care if you're 70 years old, you're 50 years old, you're 30 years old, or you're 14 years old. For me, especially with the younger generation, the millennials who are now sort of finding themselves getting promoted into middle management, and they're starting to run organizations, and they're doing some of the things. They're getting elected.
Yep.
There's an incredible opportunity for them to change what's possible.
Well, and I saw just on the millennials getting elected and stuff like that. I saw a post, a headline that says, "Should we be electing more millennials into office?" And the best reply underneath was like, "By my comprehension of linear time, I don't see how it's possible not to."
Right. Right.
Like it's like, how are you not going to do that?
So here's the scary part, though, and this is so when I go in and talk to organizations about values and the importance of defining, especially for leaders, the importance of defining your non-negotiables. It's the only way that you know whether or not you've made a good decision. So I go in and I do that, and it's this, I don't care if I talk to 65 and 70-year-olds, I talk to 50 and 60-year-olds, and they haven't done it either, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is this next generation who's coming up and now being put into a position to make decisions, to change policies, to change procedures, to change processes. They have an incredible opportunity to take things in a different direction and make things better, but they haven't done it either. So they've got to get in there and really determine those things that matter most to them, because that's what's going to shape what the future looks like. You can't just spin around, put your blindfold on, and try to pin the tail on the donkey. It doesn't work that way, or we're going to end up with the same stuff that we have right now. And our conversations 30 or 40 years from now are going to be the exact same conversations we're having today. They've got to define what matters most. They've got to let that drive their decisions, and that shape culture and policy and process and all these other sorts of things, because that is what is truly unique to you, your generation. What you care about is not what I care about, but that's okay. That's okay, as long as you are passionate about those things that you hold most dear. But if you can't articulate what those are, why on earth would I want to listen to you?
Yeah.
Do you
I
find
think-
that? Oh, sorry. I just want to to that point. Do
Yeah.
you find that people who identify their own core values are now sensitive or aware of other people's?
Oh yeah. Not only are they
Like-
more sensitive to it, they're more accepting of the fact that most people don't do this.
Yeah.
And so rather than getting upset with somebody on a personal level, they look at them and they go, well, that's just behavior. You know, there's a difference if I think you're a bad person or you're behaving badly.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
could be a great person who's just being a shithead. And
Yeah.
if I treat you that way and I'm only responding to the behavior, it really saves me from forming these opinions in my head of whether or not you're a good person or not, or whether or not I trust you or believe you, or would I go to battle with you, or would I take orders from you in, you know, even in my own organization if you're my boss. So when people start to define those things, what it really does is provide clarity as to what's going to make you happy. You know, I laugh all the time. You know, Gary Vee will be out there preaching kindness, preaching happiness, doing those things. And really what he's talking about is people who own that, people who own their values, what matters most. They can tune out all the other shit because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's been the best thing for me. It's been a couple of years since I've done it. I've really owned it. You know, I've always had a good idea of what I think was important to me, but not my non-negotiables, not the things that I'm willing to stand on a rock and say, you're not going to move me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
care what you say. This is not up for discussion.
So what are one of the things that you can't be moved on?
So those values for me, again, creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, and authenticity. So for me, my purpose that I have chosen for me in my life is to creatively impact people's lives by authentically providing hope. So if you tell me that hope is something that isn't that important, I don't care what you say to me, you're never going to convince me otherwise. There is zero things you could say to me that would make me change my mind. Now, on some other things that I find important, you could find some movement in me that I would go yes or no in either direction based on a good argument. But there is no argument you could give me that would tell me that hope is bad.
Or that you know that exists.
Right?
Yeah.
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 And for me, here's the beauty. So once you define those things, you can choose that purpose. So you see that 4 of my 6 core values are actually in my purpose.
Yeah.
Right? To creatively impact people's lives by authentically providing hope. Now, that's the purpose. That's the why. But the how is the mission.
Yeah.
And the how changes every day.
Mm.
How I'm fulfilling that today is by being on this show.
Yeah.
But how I fulfill it tomorrow will be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But my value is never going to change.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't define those values, it's a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
And so every day is a shitstorm.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to manage. So what we say is that the best decisions you can make in your life are born from your values, but they honor your feelings,
Yeah.
right? You have to, it's a yes and. It has to be both. You can't ignore your feelings because you won't stay committed.
Mm-hmm.
You can't base everything off your values and or you know, vice versa. So that would be base everything off of how you're feeling in the moment and ignore your values, because then you're not really know if you've made a good decision or not. So they're both sort of as far apart from each other as you can. You have to bring them both together and say, this is something that I've decided that is born out of those things that are my non-negotiables, but I recognize how I'm feeling in the moment. And those two things in alignment are the best decisions you can make in your life.
So you said that the core values rarely change. What if somebody's core values are garbage or they don't have any? Then do they change more?
So what I would tell you is this. I don't believe
Or is
that
it only the people with the good core values?
No. I don't believe that
change?
anybody-
I don't think it's not it's subjective. Your core values can't be good or bad. They're yours.
No, I don't agree with
Like,
that.
well, no, you would think that someone else's core values because they don't align with yours, or I don't know.
Yeah, no. See, well, first of all, I don't think anybody's core values are garbage, right?
Okay.
And so for me, so you might look at a particular value as not something that maybe one of mine doesn't resonate with you, and that's fine. But if I looked at yours and one didn't resonate with me, there's a reason that it doesn't resonate with me. And there's a reason why it is one of your core values. So you can't, sometimes our core values are born out of negative experience. Sometimes they're born out of positive reinforcement experiences, right? So if you, for me, you know, looking at something like creativity, well, I grew up my whole life around creative people, right? So I was really positively influenced by that. The hope piece, the empathy piece, the family piece, you know, some of that was born from some really awful, tragic things that have happened in my life, right? And so they can be born out of both. I would say to everyone's there, you know, it's what makes you you.
Well, okay, so let me try to get like a baseline for what I was going for here. Your
Yes,
it seems
please
that,
clarify.
Okay, hang on. Yeah, it seems that because your core it seems like when somebody has core values, you guys are talking about positive core values, because it seems like a lot of people are driven by values that are negative, like where you're like one of yours is you know, authenticity, whereas somebody else could have one of the, I'm trying to find the words, I'm trying to come up with like a value that a negative value, maybe like people have negative values that determine what they do, like they want to do less work, or they, you know, what's like a negative value that people have that stops them from doing things? Am I just making this up?
I've never met anyone with a negative.
Okay.
I think it's
The fact that it has value
Okay.
means that it really can't be negative, right? I mean, how would it
I
be
don't know.
negative?
Like a negative value? Something
So
that
I
drives
guess
people
maybe the confusion
doubt?
is like, are there defined values, right? Like creativity, hope, empathy, authenticity.
Sure.
Is there like a list?
So
You get what I'm saying?
So when I walk people through, let's do this. We'll play a little game.
Well, what about fun? Like people, one of their values is this going to be fun to me?
But that's not
that's not a value.
Well, it wouldn't be negative because it's making you happier as a person. If you're,
But
it
that
may
can
be
go
negative.
bad.
Well,
So
that's when your values don't align with someone else's.
Right. So let's do this.
Like-
Give me one of your top 3 favorite movies of all time.
You have no idea what you just did.
Well,
Doesn't have
Paper
to be
Moon.
the top, just top 3. Give me some, top 3, top 5. Give me one of them.
Paper Moon.
Paper Moon. Okay. Can you give me a 1 minute or less synopsis of what the movie is about, like the theme and what sort of happens in the movie? Give me the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, a little girl's mother dies, and at the funeral she meets a man who may or may not be her father, and through a chain of events, the man is put in charge of taking her to her only living relative, and the movie's about the adventure in between.
What happens? What are some of like the highlights that happened over the course of that adventure for her?
Well, she learns a lot of lessons by traveling through a Depression era America, and they learn a lot from each other because the man isn't used to traveling with a sarcastic little girl who talks back all the time, and there's a lot of looking at what crosses a line because he's a con man as a job, and she has the inclination to be like that too, but every once in a while they have to take a look at what they're doing and kind of see who they're ripping off and why they're doing it, and so they learn a lot about kind of themselves and how it's not really the best kind of life, but they find friendship with one another.
Is there a character in that movie that resonates more than others with you? Is there one that you really identify with, or just for whatever reason you like that character or enjoy the character?
Yeah, I like Tatum O'Neal in that movie, the little girl. And I like the dad. There's a lot of characters that they run into that I don't like.
Okay. So what is it about Tatum O'Neal that you like?
That she is independent and she has a logical way of breaking down situations, whereas other kids can't. And you can tell that she's different in the fact that she doesn't relate to people around her that much because she's more of an adult because of her hardships.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So I help people identify their core values in one of two ways. The fun way that we sort of get the ball rolling is by talking about your favorites. There's a reason you have favorites, whether it's a movie or a song or a smell or a food. And the reason you have favorites is because it scratches an itch of one of your core values or more. So the reason that I have people sort of give me that synopsis is the words that you choose say a lot about what matters to you, because somebody else who saw Paper Moon might describe it completely differently. But you chose specific words to sort of describe what that movie meant to you and what it was really all about. So in that movie, or in your description, I heard sort of themes of things like perseverance, themes of relationship. These are the sorts of things that get you started on the path to figuring out why that movie resonates so much with you, because there are reasons why it does. For me, one of my favorite movies of all time is The Natural with Robert Redford, right? So I grew up my whole life thinking I was going to play professional baseball. That was my plan. I only had one plan, and it was to play professional baseball. And I was on that path and had a pretty stellar amateur career until I got hurt. But I come from a baseball family, a baseball background, and it was, for me, for a long time, was my identity. I was the baseball guy. So that movie to me is obviously about Robert Redford, who has made it to the bigs much later in life. He's a near 40-year-old in that movie and a rookie. And so I thought, well, that's one of my favorite movies because it's about baseball. Of course I'm going to love it. But what I realized years and years after, and after I really defined those things that mattered most to me, was that my values, creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, authenticity, are all prevalent in a very profound way in that movie. Creativity. The movie starts off with a storm hits a tree in his backyard. Tree lands on his father and kills him. He takes that piece of that tree and makes a bat, of which he's now got Wonder Boy on there, right? Very creative way to handle a pretty disastrous scenario. Impact for me. Well, he comes in as a 40-year-old rookie onto this team and absolutely has the most amazing season in the history of baseball, to the point where the lightning bolt that he inscribed in the bat to honor his father, they now make patches and put it on their shoulders. Again, that type of impact that you can have with the people closest to you, he's literally influencing what they think, right? Empathy. Well, here's somebody who wanted to play baseball his whole life and sort of got it stolen away from him through a variety of circumstances. Well, I get that. It has happened to me as well, right? Family. Well, this is all about his relationship with his dad and really honoring that. I get that too. I have that relationship with my father. Authenticity. He gets offered a bunch of money to throw the game to win the pennant, and he says, that ain't happening, right? I'm going to hit away. So even though on the surface I go, well, it's a baseball movie, of course I'm going to love it.
I like baseball.
In reality, it checked every single one of those boxes. Of course it's going to resonate at such an incredible frequency with me, but I could say the same thing for Happy Gilmore. So I look at that and I go, well, what the hell does that say about me? But here's the deal with Happy Gilmore, right?
Home.
If you look at through the same lens, here's a guy who's a hockey player who's got the most fucked up swing you've ever seen in your life. Pretty creative of how he chooses to hit his baseball, right? Hope is another one wrapped up in there, right? So for him, all he wanted was to play hockey, and he's playing golf for the sole purpose of earning money to save his grandmother's house. So there's the family one. The impact he has a bunch of new people coming to the golf course going, what is happening here? These are not the type of people who normally come to watch a golf match. So he's impacted this culture to come and watch him play. Authenticity, again. One of my favorite lines in the whole movie is he asked the girl out on a date, and she goes, I don't date golfers. And he goes, well, that's great because I'm a hockey player, right? I mean, it's in his blood. It's that authenticity. So again, on the surface, stupid movie. Could I say Billy Madison, whatever. It's Adam Sandler. But it actually is checking off those boxes. So my sort of first thing to you would say, when you look at values, these are the things that that you hold dearest to your heart, right? And so I don't know that anyone would choose to hold something negative that close to them unless there was something wrong. And I mean that in the kindest way that I can say that. There's some imbalance of some kind,
well,
which
I mean, it
happens.
Yeah, and
right?
And even experiences, even if they're not, have like a condition or something, but experiences can lead people to think negatively.
Well, you're looking at, there's two things. What I would say is you're looking at the glass half full, right?
Gotcha.
You're looking at the negative. So let's say this, my son had cancer, right? So that's a pretty shitty circumstance.
Yes.
I could look and get a bunch of negative stuff out of there, but what it made me realize is the importance of family, the importance of pouring in my time, the importance of the impact that I could have on people, and the empathy of walking in someone else's shoes, because before I would have never had that. The reason that I'm getting involved with Cannonball Kids Cancer is because I get it.
Yeah.
I get it on a level that only somebody who's been in my shoes can get.
Yeah.
Right? I've had to sit on the edge of a bed and say goodbye to my son. Fortunately, that's not the outcome that we had. But I had that conversation. It haunts me to this day.
Yeah.
I've had to take those negative experiences and look at the positive thing that it has made me focus on to say, well, that's never going to happen. I'm never going to allow that to happen again to me. I'm never going to put myself in that position again where I don't know what matters, because because I didn't define any of these things. When the doctors came and told my wife and I that there was no other options, that Theo wasn't going to make it through the night, and we had to go in and say our goodbyes. I sat there, looked at my wife and went, oh, okay. And we walked back into that room and we sat on the edge of the bed and said our goodbyes. And if I would have done this work prior to then, if I would have known those things, creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family authenticity, the conversation I would have had with my son would have been completely different, a completely different conversation. But instead I allowed somebody else to tell me what was possible and what mattered to me, which is a horrible position to put yourself in, and has led to many sleepless nights of me wondering if my son's worried that I gave up on him.
Yeah.
Now, I know he doesn't, and I know that I didn't, but I most certainly would have feel better about myself to be able to have walked into that room and said, you're in control. You decide.
Yeah.
Not these doctors, not some disease. It's up to you. It's up to you. So let's have this conversation of how you want to fight. You want to sit here? I will sit here. We will scream to the top of our lungs for anybody we possibly can help. And that is literally what happened in our case. So my brother films this video, puts it on YouTube the night that we're told he's going to die. It goes viral. Within 24 hours, we have like 500,000 views. People start begging anyone to help. How are we going to save this kid? They've said they've had no options. Well, that wasn't true. There were no options according to the people in the room, but those weren't the right people in the room having the right conversation. So I had to expand my sourcing of what was possible. And when we did that, we found a miracle, and it saved his life. And he's 21 years old now and kicking ass. And we wouldn't be here if we would have just allowed somebody else to dictate the future and what was possible for our kid.
I suppose that what I was trying to get at too was that, I mean, your way, how you just described how you thought about what had happened, is an ability. I feel like self-reflection is a surprisingly rare ability for somebody to have.
Sure.
I think that a lot of,
from what I'm gathering, it's like a muscle.
So what I was talking about earlier is like somebody following something like a negative value is that you had bad things happen to you, and you look at it as, if those bad things hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't have been able to think about the way that I think. I wouldn't be on the path that I am now. But when they happen to other people, they don't do that.
But that's not true. That's not true, because he even said, like, I didn't always think like this. This isn't always how I thought.
No, but he was on his way to thinking positively.
Well, I think, again, it's like a muscle where I get what you're saying. There are people out there who are incapable of like that kind of self-awareness, or they just don't, or whatever.
But there's a reason they don't, and so and this is funny. This is all funny enough, this is all actually stuff that we wrote about in our book because it's all true. So what you're saying are all things that are real issues and real challenges, right? And so when we look at any type of change that blows into our life, change requires two things to get through it: vulnerability and forgiveness. Those are the only two ways you're going to get through change. Change biologically for us as humans is viewed as a threat. It's not even up to you. It's chemical. Your body is going to view any type of change, positive or negative, as a threat. And it's your brain's job to figure out how much of a threat it actually is. Our brains want to sort of solve the threat issue as quickly as possible, and it doesn't care if it's right or wrong. It just wants to settle it, right? So hence some of the times we make really bad decisions is because your brain just wants it to be done. It wants to make the decision and be over it. What we look at with change and vulnerability is we've been taught for decades that vulnerability is a weakness. And until people like Brene Brown have come along and shown her research where vulnerability is actually a strength, and when we lead from our vulnerability, it is leading from a position of strength, and it actually humanizes us in a way that only vulnerability can. It's pretty that on one side of the coin. It's hard to have a conversation with yourself if you're not happy with yourself. It's hard to be honest with yourself if you feel like you're a failure, if you feel like you've let somebody down, if you feel, that level of vulnerability required. Forget about with talking to someone like me and saying, this is how I feel, but just in your own head to go, maybe you're fucked up a little bit. Maybe you've got to have a conversation with yourself and say, I don't know that I'm being honest with what I really want, with what really matters to me, with a whole bunch of things. And when you get to that point of being vulnerable, you have to have the forgiveness to say it's okay. You have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive others. You got to forgive, and even going back to my pastor days, when in the Bible, when God talks about forgiveness, he actually says you have to forgive others first before you forgive yourself. That's insane.
Yeah.
But that's how it works. And so you have to be able to forgive whoever it is that wronged you. You have to forgive God or, Muhammad or Buddha or whoever you worship. You have to forgive them if you feel like they're responsible in any way of your hardships. You have to forgive yourself for failing at the things that you really wanted. And when you can do that and get vulnerable, you get down to the really nitty-gritty and those 3, 4, 5 things that truly matter most to you in your life, and you put those up in front of you and you say, with anything that's happening in your life, is this affecting that? If the answer is yes, it deserves your full attention. If the answer is no, bye-bye. I don't have room for it in my life. I don't have room to expend any sort of emotional anything towards it because it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But our emotions tell us, no, we like this. We like shitstorms. It's what keeps us going.
Yeah.
So when you're able to sort of draw the line and go, well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You let that go and you continue to focus on the things that really do matter, your life changes.
Yeah.
Your whole view of life changes. What matters, your perception of what truly matters will change. And when that happens, anybody within your vicinity is affected by that. Family, friends, anybody.
So how do you, to bring this background to like, you're a creative guy.
Yep.
Musician, touring musician for
Yep.
quite a while. How do you apply that to being creative?
Yeah.
Like it from a higher level, it's like, wow, this is like life-changing ways of thinking. But when it comes down to like a project that you're working on or a song that you're working on, have you noticed an effect on, I mean, clearly it's got to have some kind of,
Dude, it's the difference between original and a copycat.
Yeah.
Which is, it's connecting the values as you create, because his is authenticity.
Yeah.
So, if somebody says, "Are you going to do a cat litter jingle?"
Yeah.
And he's, it's not in you to do that authentically.
No,
then
and
it would
and-
affect
and
how
I
you
can tell-
how or if you create that.
And just knowing you for so long, I could tell that authenticity is part of what
Yes.
is one of your core values. Because when we see things that aren't authentic, it's like nails on a chalkboard, where it's like, ugh.
So how it works for me, at least in the music, on the music side of things, and then I'll try to convert it for you of how I would think it would work for a photographer. But for me on the music side of things, when you first learn to play music, you don't just pick up the guitar for me and just start writing songs your first second that you grab the guitar. You have to go out there and go, you know what? Deep Purple is got a song that I want to learn to play when I was a kid, or Kiss, or whatever was my inspiration in the moment. And I picked up the guitar with the sole purpose of trying to learn that song because I wanted to learn how to play that song, right?
Yep.
So I get to the point where I learn to play that song, and then I can play it as good as the person who wrote that song. And then I get so into that song that I'm able to sort of transform it a little bit and change it a little bit and put a little bit of my stuff into that song, where I don't get bored singing the same song.
Start
or
adding a
playing
couple
the same.
pauses.
That's right. I do
Yeah,
a little.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
I change the melody a little bit. Maybe I add a chorus of another song in there, and I do a little mashup or whatever it might be.
Gotcha.
But the idea becomes, in those instances, when you first start, you are only copying other people. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's how you learn.
Yeah.
You find the people that inspire you and you say, that's what I want to do. That's, when you first, when you're a singer, the hardest thing for you to do as a singer is to find your voice,
Yeah.
because all you want to do is sound like the people you love.
Yeah.
And so you mimic them, and you try to get those different ways they pronounce certain words, or vowels, and or growls in their voice, or what their range might be. But you're never going to be more than a copy of the original until you define what matters most to you, because that is original.
Yeah.
And so if you don't do that work, you're never going to become an artist. There's a difference for me for someone who is an artist to someone who is just a musician, right?
Gotcha.
The artist is the person who has defined those things in their writing, or whether it's melody and music or it's lyrics. They are tapping into those things that matter most to them, and their viewpoint, what they are saying, is an amalgamation of a lifetime of stuff that has happened to them, that they are putting forth in only the way they could say it, right? For you as a photographer, if you don't define those values, you are only going to be copying the photographers that resonate with you, that are the reason that you decided to do this in the first place. You saw an image, or someone's viewpoint, or someone's take on this or that is what inspired you to pick up the camera and start shooting.
Yeah.
But until you say, you know what, look, vulnerability for me is a key value. It's a core value. I value it more than anything else. If that's one of your core values, I should see that in every picture you take.
That's interesting, because I had that aha moment years before. So I was doing a ton of weddings, hated weddings, hated them. And I'm shooting them because it was money. I was like, I need money. And I would constantly compare myself to different photographers and constantly copy them and do what they were doing. Just, it went from like learning to like, okay, well, they're selling that, so I should do that to make money. And, just doing that. And then I went to Photoshop World and I saw Jeremy Cowart, who's an awesome photographer.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a class that was like how to become a commercial photographer. And the night before, I went online, I looked up his work, and I sat there and I was like, I could do this.
Yep.
There's nothing special about this photo.
Yep.
And I was like, it's the only reason why this is special is because it's a picture of Taylor Swift, right?
Yep.
So, and I'm like, I'm sitting there convincing myself that the only reason why I am not making it is because I don't have the opportunity to photograph Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to his class and it's packed, and he walks out and there's tons of people. And he goes, you want to make it as a commercial photographer, stop comparing your work to other photographers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, did he have like a camera in my room? Like, does he have a bot on his website? So he pulls up a picture of Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Same photo I was like knocking him on the day before. And he goes, yeah, it's a photo of Taylor Swift. And, it's not the best photo in the world. He's like, any basic student with a camera could have taken this photo, but you didn't, right? And people started getting up and walking out. And I was like, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
What is he talking about?
Yeah.
So he said, go in. He's like, go back, and I guarantee you have a list of ideas that you've been neglecting, that you have not written down and you have not done because you're too busy copying other people, right? So I'm like, that's it. That's the key.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, I was 2 seconds away from just quitting, never touching a camera again. So I went back, I wrote it down. I wrote down these ideas, and number one was like, I had this idea of a kid opening a book and looking into a book and like the story coming out, right? And so I have a kid, I've got the prop, and I grab him and I have 5 seconds with him. I cut a hole in the back of the book. I stick a light in the back of the book. And this is probably my 200,000th photo I've ever taken. And I hated it. Like I was making it. I was doubting myself. I had that. And then I was like, you know what? I spent 2 hours on this Photoshop. I'm going to upload it. And very vulnerable moment in my life where I was like, well, here we go. The most successful photo that I had up until that point. And people were like, oh my God. But it literally went from copied crap to this. And it dawned on me that as a photographer, I had been neglecting the only thing that separated me from anyone else.
Yep.
And no one talks about, and even Jeremy, who gave an awesome keynote and unlocked that thought for me, didn't say it that way, where you are literally the only thing you have to offer as a creative, whether it's a musician or a photographer or a designer, is your ideas. We can all get illustrator. Yeah, there's a level of skill that you have to learn. That's practice and that can be taught, but that's the only thing that separates me. And when you get with photographers and talk to them, it's all about, okay, well, don't tell too many secrets because we don't want, we don't want this, we don't want that. I don't want to tell, I don't want to tell you my pricing because my client, I don't want you stealing my clients. And my first response to them is, if your clients are going to leave you because of price, they're not really your client. That's a transactional relationship, and they're gone anyway.
They can get that anywhere.
They can get that anywhere. My clients come to me because they know when I do a shoot with them, it's a unique shoot that's custom to them because I don't know how to do anything else. Like we have a hard time here. We've always said this. As a business person, we should be able to make a formula. Okay, the light goes here, the light goes here, the light does this, we do this, we stand here, the settings are here. We should be able to write that down and mimic that. We never do it because we can't. As soon as you walk in, I go, I like the hair. I'm going to do this little light here. I'm going to do this, and it changes. So it's.
So that goes back to the decision supply chain, right? Because those decisions that you made, you have to trace where those decisions were born.
Yeah.
And those were born from those core values that make you you. And why that photo was successful, even though you might not have been happy with it, is because people saw some authenticity from you that they haven't seen from somebody else. That's
Correct.
what authenticity is, like a bug lamp. It draws people to it stronger than anything else I know.
Yeah.
But so few of us take the opportunity to really be authentic because we don't take the time to go, here are the 4 things. Here are the 5
That's why
things.
Gary Vee is so popular.
No
He's
question.
authentic.
No question.
It's authentically him. You know what you're getting. And maybe it's not, but he's really good at selling it that way. But
I've met Gary, and he is everything. It's one of these, you want to meet your heroes, right?
Yeah.
But he is somebody who, even in my chance meeting with him, was the kindest, most respectful, genuinely cared, asked questions, offered a photo without me even, just rock solid, man. And that's, I can't say that about a lot of the people who I've wanted to meet or have had the opportunity to meet in my life. There are very few. There are very few who are the genuine thing, whether you like him or not. He's pretty polarizing in his presentation, even though I see now he has curse-free Gary Vee, which I think is
how authentic is
That's
that?
weird.
I think
See how instantly we're like,
Hey,
Yeah.
Can you watch that? That Marshall cable is shaking that thing.
Yeah.
Just so you know. Maybe put it up on something. It's your ankle.
Is it?
sorry,
Yeah, no, it's cool.
it's my cankles.
Doesn't matter.
But
We'll just
I think
roll with it.
again, with all of the things that we've talked about, the importance of defining those non-negotiables. I cannot stress the importance of it. And here's the sad thing. I give this talk to thousands of people all the time. And the percentage of people who walk out of there and go,
that sounds like work.
I need to do this,
Yeah.
are so few and far between that, you know what ends up happening? Some catastrophic event ends up happening, is what, just like cancer did for me.
Yeah.
Rolls into their life, absolutely destroys everything in its path, and they would have had a rock solid foundation of which to stand on if they just would have taken the time to do the work.
Yep.
But instead, they make up excuses. They don't do the work. They get pissed off at me for pointing out they haven't done the work, and they wonder why their life rolls into a giant pile
You're getting
of
bad
shit
comments
when
on
it happens.
yeah.
I mean, that's what happens.
Dear
in which
Brant,
way? Yeah.
you son of a bitch.
I tried what you said, and it's been 2 weeks, and I haven't made any money.
It's,
Yeah. But like when people leave, do you think that, do you find that they try to think about how they've already done that, even though they haven't, or do they just not like the idea of defining who they are through their values?
So that's that great observation. The second I told you, I help people by sort of talking about favorites to get you started on the path. But the second way to do it is there's a worksheet that I use, and the worksheet has hundreds of common core values on it. And what I tell people to do is I want you to go onto this worksheet. I want you to look at these words, and any word that sort of has a resonance with you, you look at it and you go, oh yeah, I like that word. I want you to circle it. Mm-hmm. And when they're done, I look at it, and there are people that I call 50 worders. Mm-hmm. So out of the 200 words that I put on the page, they circled 50.
What kind of words are they? Like
these are
love
things,
and
sure,
things like that. Okay.
Empathy, sincerity, success, apathy, whatever the value is. There's a list alphabetically for people to go through from start to finish, right?
Okay.
And so they look at that, and they the people who circle 50 words. What I try to get them to understand is that when you have that many things that are really important to you, it's heavy lifting to get to your non-negotiables. But there is a massive difference between those two things.
Well, if all of those are your values, it's almost like having none.
That's right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. So, but the people who circle 8, it's a pretty short trip to get to 4 or 5, right? But it's interesting because we're all different. But there are a lot of us, especially the creatives, who would be 50 worders, and they need to sit down and go, okay, yes, important, life changing, maybe not so much. So they need to do that work, but they just choose not to do it for whatever their particular reason is. But once you actually get to it and you do the work. The biggest thing is now you have something to hold yourself accountable to, which is both good and bad, right?
Look out now.
So
don't want to get to
what
that
I tell
point.
people all the time is when you do this, and you find yourself going against what you say matters most, there's only 2 things that are going on. You're either a liar or you're lazy. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to be either one of those. So it's pretty motivating to get yourself in line.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right?
Would you recommend? Do you think there's a benefit in the failure of this, or like I guess what I'm trying to say is, should a creative before they pick their cameras or before they pick their tools, figure out
their goals for
or
their profession,
their
professional goals.
Would it be beneficial to define these? Because I'm trying to look at it from a creative standpoint where not just in life, that will make you a better person, but like, okay, I want to become a photographer. I need to sit down and pick my equipment, but I also need to pick my core values on who I am as a person because that's going to define my work. I feel like you would waste less time. Or is there a benefit in failing, not being fulfilled as an artist, and then realizing that? So, I feel like it has more of a benefit to me now knowing it.
So it's a yes and, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll give you an example for me. When I decided I was going to be a full-time musician, I went out and bought all the recording gear, had everything that I needed at the time. It was a Roland VS 880 back in the it was 2001-ish. Bought all the equipment. I had everything I needed to make a kick-ass record.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that I didn't know how to use any of that shit.
Now I just need songs.
And when I went to record, I'm like, well, that sounds like shit. This is awful.
Yeah.
Why would anybody buy this? This is a piece of crap.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize was that had no value. What I wanted was the creativity of me writing songs and performing, but what I didn't want is the creativity of figuring out how the hell to push the buttons and do the EQs and make sure that all the things are right and everything is
The work. You didn't want the work.
So you know what I did?
Yeah.
I sold all the gear and I took every penny I made from that and I hired somebody to do that.
Yeah.
I went into a studio and said, this is it. Here's all the money I have. If you're telling me this is only 4 songs, then we're going to do 4 songs. If we can't do a full record, I want 4 kick-ass songs that are the best that I can produce. I don't want 10 half-ass songs, even though it's a full album. I just want the best because it needs to be the best representation of me, which is part of what we've talked about, even with my own stuff, where people pay me good money now to get out and talk. You've said right. I go to YouTube and some of the presence of the video stuff for you isn't great. I'm like, yeah, no shit. But that's what
It just doesn't match. It doesn't match the quality.
It's not a representation
exactly.
of who I am and what I do. And that's whether you're a photographer, whether you're a videographer, whether you are a speaker.
But that's part of that. That should always be changing. You should, like I tell photographers all the time, you should be embarrassed by photos that you've taken in the past. Not
correct.
Not like I have.
There's
photos,
a certain level where that stops.
But as long
I don't know.
The goal would be that at that time when you took those photos, they were the
amazing.
best you could do.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
That's why you have to
That's it.
David Mamet said you have to stand being bad.
Yeah.
Because even if that's the best you can do, if that's the best you can do and it's bad, you have to be able to stand that to be able to improve.
I have an album. I have 2-3 albums of photos near my desk.
Yep.
That are the worst photos. I'll show them to you when we're done, and you're going to be like, "Who took these?"
Yeah.
And I look at them occasionally.
Yeah.
Just to remind myself, like, "Damn, dude,
Yeah.
you suck." Like, and I'm not like I'm not knocking myself or anyone who has photos that stink, but if you don't look at photos that you've taken in the past or creative or songs and go, oh, why did I add that echo?
Yep.
Oh, why did I add that effect? You're not growing.
That's true.
So anyway, so that's,
So I think you have to define those things to know how they're going to come out in whatever the work you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's purchasing gear or whether that's snapping a photo or recording a video or whatever it might be, you have to define those things to know that is the metaphorical lens you are looking through, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is exactly what it is. It's going to guide your decisions, no matter what part of your life you want to choose to sort of use them in. But I think you have to. I think you have to do that. If you do that, you are going to find yourself not competing.
Yeah.
I think that, what you're talking about also touches on what you were talking about earlier, channeling passion. There's a lot of people who would have bought all that equipment and been like, this sounds like garbage. I need to learn how to make it sound better. And they would have liked getting in there, turning the knobs.
Yeah.
This wire restricts the electricity flow to the mic, to the amps, to the wattage, and that's becomes their thing. And they wouldn't have why would I pay somebody? I can spend years of my life figuring it out. Well, and that's more of a passion issue too, but that's also a passion
and I
issue.
think to your point of failure, right? Of looking at failure and allowing yourself to fail and learning from that. So whenever I help somebody define their core values, once they have that list of 5 or 6, then we have what I call the proving stage. You need to prove to me that these are the ones.
Yeah.
So
it's easy to say it.
It's easy to say.
It's another thing to.
So you need proof, and that proof will show up daily. So what I have people do, I just did this with someone I'm working with, where we said, here are the 6 things. She had 8. We got them down to 6 that she was still pretty comfortable with saying these are super, super important to me. So I said, okay, so now what we do is she has a worksheet every day. At the end of each day, she has to go into her journal and she needs to tell me proof of how those things showed up in her life. Mm-hmm. Don't manufacture it. Don't twist it.
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth just like it is. If it showed up, great. If it didn't, that's fine too. There's no right or wrong. But what we do is we go back at the end of a week and we go, okay, well, this particular one showed up every day. This one over here only showed up twice. is this
Yeah.
a core value, or is this something that's just important? And what ends up happening is over the course of weeks and months, you get a real clear picture of those things, because the 6 that I have been proven time and time and time and time again that if they're not showing up, that's on me.
Yeah.
I'm actually blocking them from showing up because I'm not taking opportunities that I should be doing, because I'm being distracted by things that I shouldn't be distracted by. So if creativity isn't showing up, it's because I'm not making time for me to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't have an opportunity to speak with someone, or to play the guitar, or to do some writing, or however that creativity is going to be birthed that day, if I don't take the time to do that, that's when we get depressed. That's when we feel anxiety. That's all those sorts of things creep in, because our values are not being fed.
And I feel like it's easy to take that and pin that on something else.
Oh yeah, that's it.
That's not supposed to be there.
That's it.
So that's crazy. So I ask everyone that comes on here. This question is, what do you love the most about being a creative?
For me, it's the impact of the work beyond anything else. I don't create it for me, which is a little weird. I think I've met a lot of people who they don't care about how anybody else feels about the stuff they create. It's for them. I'm just the opposite. I create it for the impact it's going to have on someone else, whether that's writing a song, whether that's giving a talk, whether that's writing a book. I'm doing it not for me. I guess maybe you could argue that I'm doing it for me to fulfill some of those values.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's the impact part of that, as being a creative, that makes me want to get up tomorrow and do it again.
Yeah.
Every time.
That's cool. Cool.
Well, then there's a second part to your question.
What part don't you like?
What's your least favorite?
What's your
part?
least
Of being a
favorite?
creative?
See, here's the thing. The
He
reason
doesn't
why I
even know
didn't,
his own
the
questions.
reason why I didn't no, hold on. I've been thinking about dropping that question
Why?
only because I feel like I should switch it.
What's a hardship?
I want to
that
end
you've
on a positive note.
endured.
But now,
yeah.
but now I want to answer the what I don't like.
Yeah.
What don't so I don't have a problem with asking it.
Yeah.
I'm always like, I want to hear that answer.
Well, I have a
I'm
bonus
more
question.
excited about that question.
After he answers that one, I have a bonus question.
Okay.
That could end it on a
So-
positive note.
What don't you like about being a creative? What's your number one thing you hate about being a creative?
Idiots.
Idiots.
Uh-huh.
That's a first. What? Help me out with
No,
that. Elaborate.
Tell me more of this.
I hate idiots chiming in on whether they think what I've created is good or bad.
Oh, so I have a thing for this. What I say about this is, it's easy to say what you would or wouldn't do when you've done nothing at all.
Yeah.
That's my number one. It's like, oh, whenever someone comes to me and they're like, people hate my work, it's like, oh, well, what have they done?
Yeah.
What have they done?
Yeah. It's for me, as much as I want to say I ignore that stuff and I've got thick skin, which to an
So
extent
hard.
I do, there's a part of me that just wants to punch him right in the fucking face every time.
Well,
they say
so
something like
Kate,
that.
so just so you know, I'm more like you with
Yeah.
that. I tend to, I'll read it.
Yeah.
They say don't go to the comment section.
Right.
I have to.
Oh, me too.
I have to. Caleb, on the other hand,
I don't just go. I respond to
Yeah.
the comments,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is the problem.
Yeah.
Which is death.
Which is when my wife says, "Get the hell off of Facebook."
Caleb, on the other hand, he will plant seeds
Oh.
and then walk away
The long game.
and let them just destroy themselves. It is like his son. It is like that's his son up there. He is like, and he has, man, and I'm telling you, it's a skill that he should be teaching keynotes, like how to troll a troll.
I love
That's
it.
Caleb, but I'm not that way. When I put something out there that I've put my heart and soul into,
Yep.
and I know that sounds cheesy, but I've put everything I've got into it. Yeah, I could always do something better.
Yep.
For instance, we did a verbal abuse campaign.
Yep.
We made an executive creative decision not to interfere with anything in that photo.
Yep.
So some of the kids were chewing. They had the bacon neck.
Yep.
They were chewing on their shirt. It was all crinkled to the
Yep.
side. Their necklaces to the side.
Yep.
As a portrait photographer,
Yeah.
I should fix that.
Yeah.
As a photojournalist,
Yes.
I should leave it alone.
Yes.
So we wanted these photos to be as authentic as possible.
Yep.
So I lit it like a portrait.
Yes.
But I stepped away.
Yeah.
creatives couldn't comprehend that.
Right.
Portrait photographers were like, you should have fixed his neck.
Yeah.
And actually the details, that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
Some of them have boogers in their nose, you know, and that to me is like, that's a real photo.
Yeah.
Even though I lit it and staged the actual pose or them sitting there.
Yeah.
So the troll thing, yeah, the idiots, I get it, but I'm like you where I have to.
I'll take thoughtful criticism
Yeah.
all day, every day. The idiots are what drive me crazy.
Oh yeah.
If you give me your reason why, and it's a thoughtful thing, and I just maybe I think I would have preferred this, and you give me some actual thought behind why you're telling me this or criticizing me, I enjoy it and I learn from that and I grow from that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just an idiot, there's just nothing there for me other than wanting to.
Call you an idiot.
Oh,
Yeah.
So what?
I have deleted
understand.
more posts than I have actually posts.
I
in my life.
understand. I understand that. I just know that's people fighting the wave of idiots or letting that bother you.
Yeah.
It's an impossible battle because no matter
It
what
is.
you create,
Yep.
there's nothing. It's so funny because if you go on IMDb,
Yep.
look up The Natural,
Yeah.
it'll have like a 7.6.
Yes. Yes.
Or,
Right.
an 8.3.
Right.
Which means that there's people that are like
Yeah.
1 star.
That's right.
dumb.
Yes.
I don't like this. There's no Martin
Yeah.
Scorsese's movies have an average of like, a 7.1.
Yep.
It's like he's definitely in the top 100. I don't think you would get much arguments from
Yeah.
that of like the greatest
Sure.
filmmakers of all time.
Sure.
Even if you're in the top 100 best that ever has been,
Yes.
people are like, man,
That's
it's
right.
impossible.
Yes.
So
I laugh on the
I let-
on the surveys after I give my talks. They they always send them to the speakers. You get to see their comments. They don't show the
Yeah.
name, but they show you the comments, right?
Yeah.
And so I always love because the comments will be like, and these are always back to back. One is most amazing talk I've ever heard in my life. Life changing. I'll never be the same. The very next thing says, what the hell was he here for? That made no sense and had no. There's no reason he should have been at this conference. And I'm like, they're back to back.
Back to back,
Mm-hmm.
completely opposite.
But I'd be lying if I told you that it didn't bother me. But so there's a part of me that would say to you, you can't let that happen. But I think that we get the best of us when we do.
Oh, yeah.
But we do it too. I mean, we do it.
Oh,
It's,
yeah,
it's
of
easy to be
course.
like, look at them,
Yeah.
they're doing it, but we do it too. And
Yes.
I saw this interview once with Violent J from Insane Clown Posse, right?
Oh.
And that's the
God.
response,
Oh,
right?
God.
That's the response, right? But
And tune out.
Yeah.
and fade. That is the response. But hear me out. And this is what just changed my perspective
Yep.
on the mentality of this guy.
Yep.
Literally voted the #1 worst band
Yes.
by like whatever magazine,
Yes.
right? And they were on Howard Stern, and he's like, yeah, we've been saying it for years. We don't play instruments.
Yeah.
We don't do anything. And he
Yes.
goes, but here, I guarantee you the editor of that, the person that wrote that
Yeah.
was in a failed band.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'd never comprehended how someone can say that something sucks.
Yep.
He's like, I don't like Steely Dan.
Yep.
But if he's selling out a bar
Yep.
or a concert and people are having the time of their life,
Yep.
who am I to say that sucks? So Howard Stern gets the author on the
Yeah.
phone. And he asks him, he's like, were you in a failed band? He's like, well, I was in a band in high school. He goes, yep, see, there it is. There you go.
Yeah.
And that's always backed up because I saw something else with him where he was like, he's filming backstage and he sees a thing on the sign on the wall that says someone scratched in, orgy sucks. And he goes, he's filming it. He goes, right here's a hater. And he goes, you notice how the person who wrote this didn't leave their band name? He's like, honestly,
Yeah.
he's like, it's easy to write orgy sucks.
Yeah.
How come you're not, where's your band to back it up?
Yeah.
You probably don't even have a band.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And
Yeah.
that's where it comes from.
Yep.
It's easy to say what you would and wouldn't do when you've done nothing at all.
Yep.
And so I know it's ICP and everyone goes, oh my God. But that's my point is
Yeah.
that we also do it where it's like, nah,
Yeah. All the time.
But there's a difference between like constantly doing it
Yes.
and then actively
and letting
maliciously
it
doing
and
it
letting it affect
Sure.
and letting
Yeah.
it affect
how you
Tear you
operate.
down. Yeah.
And I always try to think of that when I read these things. I always try to sit back and go, where I get sucked in is when they start to have legitimate questions. Like, well, what's the purpose of this? And then all of a sudden it's like a trap, and he can see it. Well, Caleb can see it a mile away. Me, I'm like, well, you see, I'm trying to bring awareness to childhood cancer and the injustice of blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I got him.
Yeah.
He's engaged. And then next thing you know, it's this troll thing.
Well, it's endless.
It is endless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But
okay.
Rabbit hole.
My question was
The
that-
bonus.
Yeah, the bonus thing. It doesn't have anything to do with
Bonus.
creativity. It has something more to talk about. Something that you brought up earlier.
Mhm.
And it's always something that I've always been trying to find an answer for. I don't even know if there really is an answer. But all the answers that I've heard to this question, I've kind of found unsatisfactory. But I guess
Great.
no, not even unsatisfactory. Okay, hang on. Maybe not.
Talking about setup for
Hang on.
failure.
Maybe not unsatisfactory. I don't know.
Just
Maybe I
ask
can
it.
find a
Hit
better
it.
way of articulating
Let's
it.
get,
That's fine.
yeah.
So, do you think that hope and faith are two separate things, or one and the same?
We're getting deep here. Bring it low.
So I hope that this answer
There
resonates. with
really
you.
might not even be an
So
answer.
here's-
That
He
was a
actually
bad.
has- he
That was a
actually-
bad way of putting it.
He actually
I
has
would-
a switch underneath his desk that as soon as you answer that wrong, you're going to fall into a fiery pit.
It'll just shock him.
So
It-
what I would tell you is that for some people, I believe they are absolutely two separate things.
Okay.
Okay. For someone of faith, I don't know how you can separate them.
Okay.
So if you aren't a person of faith, then they have to be separate because hope is such a powerful thing, whether you attach it to faith or not. For people who aren't religious, who don't follow any particular religion, that doesn't mean that they aren't allowed hope, right? It doesn't mean that they don't have access to hope, because they most certainly do. The question becomes, where do you believe hope comes from, right? I think that's the real question. And so for some of us, we would answer one way, and for others, we would answer something completely different. And so what I would say the most important answer to that is that no matter what you believe, hope is available to you, period. If you are a person of faith, then hope should have a deeper rooted meaning for you in your life, of where the hope is birthed from, what's promised to you. For others who aren't Christian, who might follow a different religion, that hope still in whatever faith they choose from still has a root, whether that's Muhammad or Allah or wherever they believe that might come from. I still believe that for them, they would tell you that hope comes from whatever they believe. And so depending upon what you believe may determine the root of where that hope comes from. But if you don't believe in anything, that doesn't mean that hope doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Yes, but yes. So what I would say is that, having hope is the same as having faith in something. So hope is, a hope is looking at the way that I see it, and the way that, the two words are defined is, so hope is expecting hope, like wishing for an outcome, or, hope. You have hope in something that you can. I haven't really found an instance where you can't interchange the word with faith. And I'm only bringing this up because earlier you said that, bringing hope is one of your core values.
So there are lots of people, when I ask them about their core values, give me faith as one of their core values. Okay. And for me, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said faith as well. But what I tried to do for myself, when someone tells me that faith is one of their core values, my first question is, well, what does that mean? Because I don't know what that means.
That doesn't really mean anything.
Right.
You have faith in what?
You have faith that Angus prime rib is the best prime rib.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean. So I had to take faith as a word and really break it down to what I believe faith is.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's where the hope, impact, and empathy comes from. In my values are really hope or faith being split into the actionable items that how I live out my faith. Okay. So faith, if it's semantics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So faith,
It is.
Faith, if you attach the word faith to any religion, period, I understand the confusion.
Yeah.
If you take faith on face value as to what faith actually is and remove it from religion, then I agree that it is interspersible with hope.
Because, a lot of people say I have faith that God exists. And when I say, when I've said to religious people before, not even as a negative, just as I don't know why this question, why I like talking about this topic, but I say, how is that different than saying, I have hope that God exists?
Yeah.
And for some reason, religious people, which, I consider myself a somewhat religious person, they don't like that. Faith, it's like, I have faith he exists, not hope. Hope makes it sound like it could not happen.
I'm hoping.
Whereas,
So for the reason is because that the people who are coming to you from a foundation of faith would tell you that the reason they have hope is because of faith. Okay?
And that's where I say, tell me the difference.
Right. and
that's when he gets kicked out of church.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but that's
Excuse me, preacher. Just hear me out. Hear me out.
For the person who says that faith is tied specifically to Jesus, that is a different conversation than it is my faith in Jesus that provides me hope is a correct statement for someone who follows Christ.
What about, it's my hope in Jesus that gives me faith?
So this is the semantics of the word.
Yeah.
And the reason that they get
Sorry.
the reason they get upset is because faith is a much stronger, deeper rooted word than hope.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope
Mm-hmm.
the Celtics win this year.
Mm-hmm.
I hope the Patriots win again next year. My faith, if I said I have faith that the Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl again next year, okay, that's one thing. But the hope and faith thing, they're both, depending on the context, right next to each other,
Yeah.
or a mile apart,
Gotcha.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so well, it's great. There's a song by an artist named Foy Vance, who's one of my absolute favorite singer-songwriters. He's from Ireland. And he has a song called Two Shades of Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, one's the enlightened soul and the other's more like a hangman's rope. And I think that depending on what side of hope you've been on, really gives you clear understanding of what that word means.
Mm-hmm.
Faith, on the other hand, I had hope that my son was going to survive. My faith went into the shitter when cancer hit, and God and I went toe-to-toe. To this day, we still go toe-to-toe regularly because my faith was rocked by me giving up hope.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so for me now, I have to separate those words, because on the days that Jesus and I are in the ring and we're not seeing eye to eye on things, I can't give up my hope.
Yeah.
I can't. My faith might be all over the place, but my hope has got to stay intact.
I think I understand this. So I hope that we can wrap this up because my butt is
I have
numb.
faith.
And I have faith that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah,
I
that
was
was
kind
all I
of
wanted
dozing
to
off
know.
there. No,
That's
this was
pretty
that
good.
was awesome. That was really cool.
I just feel that because you were a pastor or are a pastor, depending on how you want to think of it, you know.
It's not like the Marines. I think you is it like a
I was
Well, it might
I was
be.
ordained
in
so I don't know
heart,
what that
in
is,
heart,
yes.
in heart, you can always be a pastor.
Sure.
But I think that the way that people look at faith and hope, can tell a lot about somebody. How much they rely on the unknown.
People who would argue with you one way or the other,
Mm-hmm.
I would argue, don't understand either.
Exactly. Well, that's
Yeah.
why I asked you the question. This is
All
a
right,
better
so-
answer than most.
So, where can people find information about you? Where can
Yeah.
they follow you?
Mhm.
So, brantmenswar.com, BRANT MENSWAR. That's my website. You can find all my speaking engagement type stuff there. Big Kettle Drum is just bigkettledrum.com for all the music stuff. We have a couple shows coming up. We're playing a bunch of motorcycle rallies this year, so that'll be some fun.
And you do more than just keynote big conferences. You also do private
I do.
meeting with corporations or smaller groups and helping them
I-
identify the core values of a corporation or
That's
a
right.
nonprofit as well. So
That's correct.
all that information is on his website. Definitely follow him on Instagram and take a look at his stuff. It's pretty cool stuff. And if you get a chance to see him speak, go to that conference. Just sneak in,
Mm-hmm.
do whatever you got to do. Go get it. Go take a look at it.
Break the law. I'm all about it. Let's do it.
Yeah. So anyway,
Awesome. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this was a good talk, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I
this was
really
awesome.
appreciate
Thanks for
it.
coming
Very
in also.
cool.
That's it. Later, guys.
bye.
See you.